So let us begin with the intersection of law, morality, and religion. Right? So we know that religion and morality are really key concepts when it comes to looking at the law itself. These are two major areas that persons usually look at or usually see in contention with the law itself, right? As for me specifically, this is where I did my IA on, right? The intersection of law, morality, and religion. Right. I'll be free to share my views on this after, right? We look through the entirety of the topic, right? So morality and the law itself. Morality itself. So we know that morality is a system of principles and beliefs about what is right and what is wrong. So these are the guiding principles, right, for human behavior and interactions within the society. And this is based on ethical judgments, right? So these principles themselves are not necessarily laws, right? But if you breach some amount of moral principle, it can lead to ostracization, it can lead to all sorts of different issues within society, but they will not lead to legal repercussions. Morals themselves are now the specific beliefs and practices derived from moral principles governing behavior and actions within a community or society. Rules themselves are guidelines or directives prescribing or prohibiting actions, regulating conduct, and maintaining order, which may or may not be based on moral principles. Right? So we're defining these three key terms that will be used or that has to be used within any discussion, right, as it relates to morality and the law itself. Right? So the overlap and divergence, right? So the overlap, law and morality often intersect as both seek to regulate human behavior. So please note that. So morality seeks to regulate human behavior as much as law does, right? And they help to promote justice, or promote principles of justice, fairness, and ethical conduct. Many legal principles and rules are based on moral considerations reflecting shared societal values and norms, right? So law can be derived from morality. Morality can be a source of law. When you look at customs within a society, there is a source of law there, right? You have some amount of divergence though. However, law and morality are not synonymous. While some laws may align with moral principles, right, others may diverge or even conflict with widely held moral beliefs. Legal systems may prioritize social order, efficiency, and or other pragmatic conditions, right, or considerations over moral ideas rather in certain cases, right? So sometimes the law will actually diverge from morality itself, right? Can we note any examples on which something may be illegal or legal but be immoral in the same way? And you can provide any answer you'd like, any example you'd like, because different persons have different morals and it must be accepted, right, in this space, right? Or it must be acknowledged rather within this space. So, are there any examples of laws or morals that diverge, right? Something that is moral or immoral but not legal or illegal. Something that is legal or illegal that is not moral or immoral. Anything itself. We can use any example. Should I rephrase the question?
Yes, please.
All right. So, is there anything within the law itself that outlaws something or well does something? Any law itself that leads to something that we deem as immoral? Okay, so you could look at same-sex marriages are not considered moral, right? But that's where it has an overlap within the Caribbean context. Oh, well, generally within the Caribbean context, where same-sex marriages are not considered moral and considered illegal as well. So that's an overlap of morality and religion within a Caribbean context, right? Abortion could be one itself, right? I would deem that act completely
Incent.
fine. Repeat? Incest?
Yes, sir.
Incest. All right. So those type of things. We'll look at these different things that are deemed that more. We could look at how morality and the law really overlaps there, right? Abortion, completely fine for me under certain circumstances, right? But it is deemed as illegal within certain Commonwealth Caribbean territories. Self-defense has some amount of moral tone to it as well, all right? So we have that there. Okay. All right. So we have some of those main examples there. The sources and foundations specifically, right? Moral principles are often rooted, right? They are not only rooted. Humans can exist with morals without religion. That is an important thing to note. I know that a lot of persons do not want to see that fact. They just remain blind. They cover them eyes or them and them ears or them hear that humans can exist with morality without religion. But it is completely true. But morals are often found are rooted in religion, but not always. Right? So, moral principles are often rooted in religious, philosophical, and cultural traditions, and they may vary across different societies and individuals. Moral judgments are typically based on notions of right or wrong, right? So so the society decides this is right, therefore it is law, right? So you could look at the overlap like that. If society decides that it's wrong, it could be outlawed, right? So you could think about stuff like that, right? So what is really right or wrong, good or bad, and everything like that is influenced by factors such as empathy, compassion, and conscience within the society itself. It all depends on perspective. Right and wrong don't technically exist philosophically, right? But it depends on the perspective of the society. The law itself, no, the foundations of law are through, derived from authority from governmental institutions, right, and their coercive mechanisms. We know that. So we just have to note the differences in the foundations of morality and law. Right, we spoke about the entirety of the foundations of law before, so we're not going to go through that, right? But there are differences between how morality works and how the law works, right? The role of morality in law, however, is to be a guiding principle. So morality can serve as a guiding principle in the creation, interpretation, and application of laws, right? So we could look at that. So when speaking about legislation, um, legislation, legislative interpretation, and sentencing and stuff like that, morality will play an interesting role there, along with equity, right? For legal reform as well, morality can lead to legal reform, right? For example, right, the Bastardy Act, right, it has fallen into the realm of immoral. Therefore, morals and values and principles within the society can lead to some amount of reform or change from existing laws. For example, if we look at Northern American societies specifically, I mean, technically the Caribbean is in Northern America. So let's speak about mainland American societies specifically, right? We look at the fact that same-sex marriage was completely immoral throughout the 1950s, going out through the 1960s into the early 2000s, completely immoral, right? And that stayed as completely illegal. As the morality of the society changes, the law goes through legal reform until it is now legalized. So you can see that law changes with the maturation of a society, right? So you could note that. So moral principles may change, and that can lead to legal reform within a society. Somebody raise their hand. Go ahead.
Sir,
Go ahead.
so with the safe clause law, do you think laws has changed to an extent where it accept certain immoral things?
With the saving law clause.
Yes, sir.
Okay. With the saving law clause, what does it speak to?
To save laws from pre-independent into post.
Right. So some laws that existed before independence, right? Some of them are retained via constitutional supremacy. Well, sovereignty. Well, it would be supremacy rather, right? To protect them from overall parliamentary sovereignty. You're asking whether or not it protected the legal system from passing immoral things into law.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it depends on what you deem as immoral. Right, so it all depends on what you deem as immoral. So the parliament does have some amount of power to change aspects of the constitution and aspects of legislation, right? If they do, it's all the power is really invested within the constitution and its relationship with the parliament. Right. So whether or not you deem that laws nowadays being passed are moral, right, that would depend on your perspective. So you're asking whether or not I believe, right, that the saving law clause is not defending, right, those old laws, right, from being reformed into supporting immoral consequences. I would say that specifically no. Are you speaking about a Caribbean context? Let me just ask.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so I would say specifically no. I wouldn't see. I wouldn't see that. I don't see that specifically, right? From my perspective, I won't see that. Because what I deem as moral or immoral, you may see it differently. So that's what I would say on that part. I wouldn't see it per se. I would have to be asked about a specific law that has been passed and whether or not I deem it moral or immoral. Right? So whether or not immoral laws are coming through and the saving law clause is not defending against those legal reforms, I can't really say anything about that. Right? So it's based on the objective view of society, right? So we know, the society itself may have one general moral view, but individuals also exist within the society that have different moral views from the overall view of the society, right? So a lot of persons tend to have different views, and as it relates to the overall moral view of the society, I think that I am an anomaly. Right? So some things I completely agree with majority of the society. With some things I completely disagree with majority of the society. Therefore, I can't really just have an overarching statement saying that I, believe that there are immoral laws in the past. I can't really say that right now. Okay. So the limits and controversies here, we have pluralism occurring within the society. Societies are characterized by moral pluralism. So this means that individuals and groups may hold diverse or conflicting moral beliefs, right? This suits my example completely, right? So legal systems must navigate these differences. Because one section of society may have one view and the other section of society may have a different view. What do we pass into law? How does the legal system respond to these different views? Right? That's an issue, right? That's a limit here. Controversial issues, some legal and moral issues are deeply contentious and subject to ongoing debate, such as abortion, euthanasia, capital punishment, and same-sex marriages, right? So these controversies highly will highlight the complexity of divergent moral principles within the legal framework. Right, so we're generally looking at that, those controversial issues, and that are due to social pluralism, right, or moral pluralism. Right, so moral pluralism basically speaks that different areas of society would have different moral views. Usually, the upper class will have a different moral view than the lower class because they tend to think differently on different subjects, right? Because they're treated differently and they have different, I would say, they have different, I wouldn't say lives, but for example, in the case of Jamaican society treats the upper class way differently from the lower class, right? So since they have different outlooks on society itself, they have different experiences within the same society that would lead to different moral outlooks, right? And then since they have different moral outlooks now, two different sides of the same society may have controversial issues with each other, right? On contentious topics, right? So this creates an entire pool of confusion and continuous debate to figure out whether or not the morals of society itself can be used to determine what can be placed in legal framework. Right? So we could be speaking about that. So some case law here that we look at with morality and the law, we have Shaw versus Director of Public Prosecutions from 1962. Can somebody let me know the facts of the case? What are the facts of this case?
Sir, E. Shaw had published a ladies' directory in which
Mm-hmm.
prostitutes placed their advertisements, and and he was prosecuted for the conspiracy to corrupt public morals and was convicted.
Okay, so what is the ratio decidendi? What was the ratio decidendi for the case? Anybody? You guys understand what I mean by what is the ratio decidendi, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, lovely. So what is the ratio decidendi for this case here? So have a think about it and go ahead. Go ahead. Alright, so I see something in the chat. If you want to unmute now, you just raise your hand and go ahead. Court public morality, right? So conspiracy to court public morals, as was a general reason for deciding that conviction. So at the time within England, prostitution itself was seen, overall, right? the publishing of the advertisements within the directory, right, was seen was basically for prostitutes for soliciting any type of fornication or anything like that, for legal tender, for well, not for legal tender, for monetary tender, for money, stuff like that, right? So since it was seen as a complete corruption or conspiracy to corrupt public morals within the society at this time, right, it was seen as a crime at common law, right? So we could look at that. At the time, there was no such law in legislation itself, right, that was against him doing this. But the court itself had residual power to protect the morality of the society, therefore still convicting him for the conspiracy of corrupting public morals, or conspiracy to corrupt public morals, right? So could speak to that, because that's right up that entire enforcement by the court was still supreme and fundamental, right, in the purpose of conserving the morality and safety of the society. It was a purpose of law to maintain complete social order within society. So since it was seen as going against the morality of the age, right, then the law itself must actually highlight one of its functions, which is to maintain that order, right? So that's what's happening with Shaw v. DPP, right, and the morality in that case there. R.V. Noller, 1972. Who has the facts of that case? State the facts. Okay, so go ahead.
Noller published a gay magazine which invited readers to meet the advertisers for the purpose of homosexual practices.
Mm-hmm.
And he was convicted on two counts: one, the conspiracy to corrupt public morals, and to outrage public decency.
Okay, lovely. Right, so Suwana has it in the chat as well. Right, so yeah, the entirety of the thing was basically a magazine publishing thing as well, promoting homosexual practices, right? And that was seen as also against the public morals of the society itself. And since it was deemed as a greater offense than just prostitution, he was charged on two counts, right? Conspiracy to corrupt public morals and conspiracy to outrage public decency, right? So looking at those type of things, public outrage, public decency was unknown to law itself, right? But the appellant rather, right? Because he appealed originally, right? Because conspiracy to outrage public morals are well. He appealed because the conspiracy to outrage public decency did not exist in law. All right, so that's why he appealed there, right? But he was still seen guilty for his behavior regardless, right? So even though the conspiracy to outrage public decency wasn't held, conspiracy to corrupt public morals was still held there, right? So the house itself, the court itself, right, did state that they had no residual power to actually allow conspiracy to outrage public decency to be right instilled, right? For those new offenses, they didn't have the power to create new offenses, right? That was a task of Parliament, right? So what they did was still convict him, though, right, on conspiracy to corrupt public morals, right? So we had that there in R.V. Noller Publishing Limited, 1972. For R.V. Gibson, what is the facts of the case there? 1991.
Sir,
Go ahead.
this is a case of where I think there was an exhibition in a
Mm-hmm.
commercial art gallery, like some human something fetus or something like that. So I don't quite remember exactly, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and he was charged with outraging public decency.
Okay. Lovely, lovely approach to that case, right? So it was an art gallery, right, in which members of the public were supposed to, pay to enter and look, right? A commercial art gallery, right? And there were some sculptures, right? Some pieces made from freeze-dried human fetuses, right? So what was happening going on? Gibson himself was charged for outraging public decency, right? A charge that has not been brought about for around, what is it, around 70 to 80 years thereabout. Some amount of it was 80 years actually. if I actually read the numbers, right, 8 years, right? So it has not been brought about. So his defense was that offense was not no longer known to law. That was his defense, right? So what was the general thing now, right? Something right there was still going to allow for him to be convicted, right? He was rightly convicted for the tendency to corrupt public morals using the doctrine of stare decisis with the Shaw versus DPP case, right? So they use that as legal precedent, right, in order to charge Gibson with conspiracy to outrage public decency, right? So we have that there. So those are the three different cases that we tend to look at when it comes to understanding was turning into a criminal offense over some amount of time, yes. Right? So we have that there for the morality on law. Alright?